Ever think about how, like, a Roman emperor or Genghis Khan would handle a tough day at the office?
Probably not the first thing that comes to mind, right?
No, but maybe there's something to be said for thinking like a strategic mastermind, even if our battles are more about deadlines than, actual warfare.
Right, like how can we apply those historical military tactics to everyday life?
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. It's a book that might seem a little intense for, like, self-improvement, but trust me, it's full of surprisingly useful insights.
Green's book is so fascinating because he takes these concepts that were like designed for conflict and applies them to areas we wouldn't expect: personal growth, relationships, even just making tough decisions.
Right off the bat, Greene emphasizes this idea of self-directed warfare, which I love.
Yeah, it's like he's saying before you can conquer the world, you got to conquer your own mind.
Exactly. It's about mastering our thoughts and emotions because those inner weaknesses, those are the things that can really sabotage us in the long run.
It's so true. He argues that, like, the most important battles are the ones we fight within ourselves.
So it's like my biggest obstacle isn't that looming deadline, it's me getting in my own way.
100%. And the good news is Green provides some really clever strategies for actually tackling this. One that really stood out to me is what he calls the guerrilla war of the mind.
Okay, guerrilla war of the mind. That sounds intense, but I'm intrigued. Break it down for us.
Think of it this way. A traditional army, they might have strength in numbers, right? But a guerrilla force, they're adaptable. They use surprise, they use the terrain to their advantage.
Okay, so how do we wage a guerrilla war in our own heads?
It's all about cultivating mental flexibility, being open to new information, new ways of thinking, because the world is constantly changing, so clinging to outdated beliefs, that's a surefire way to get stuck.
That makes so much sense. When was the time that you had to adapt your own thinking to kind of like succeed in a challenging situation? I remember when I was,
It's essential, right? And along those lines, Green also talks about the death ground strategy, which, again, sounds a little intense.
yeah, I was going to say death ground strategy. We're not talking about actual danger, are we?
Not at all. It's more of a metaphor.
Okay, good. Because I was a little worried for a second there.
Imagine a general backing their troops into a corner, removing any possibility of retreat. It forces them to fight with everything they've got.
Ah, okay. So it's about creating a sense of urgency, that feeling of no turning back.
Exactly. It's about that laser focus you tap into when the stakes are high.
So how do we create that back against the wall energy for ourselves, but in a healthy way? Like, what if I want to finally start that side hustle I keep putting off?
You could totally use the death ground strategy for that. Like, set a firm launch date, even announce it publicly. That self-imposed pressure, that feeling of no turning back now, it can be incredibly motivating.
So it's not about creating unnecessary stress. It's about understanding the psychology of motivation and using that to our advantage.
Exactly.
I like it. Okay, so we've talked about self-directed warfare, battling ourselves, but Green doesn't stop there. He also dives into organizational warfare, which is all about navigating conflict within groups.
Yes. And this is where things get really interesting because, let's be real, sometimes the office, the family dinner table, those can feel like war zones.
Ooh, tell me about it. So what wisdom does Green offer for navigating those everyday battlefields?
Well, the first strategy he highlights is to avoid groupthink, which is absolutely crucial in any group setting.
Groupthink, that feeling when everyone's nodding along and you're like, are they really all on board or are they just going with the flow?
Yes. And Green would say groupthink isn't just awkward, it's a liability. When everyone thinks the same way, you stifle creativity, you stifle innovation. So he emphasizes building a culture where people feel safe to disagree.
It's like that saying, if everyone's thinking alike, then someone isn't thinking. So it's about actually valuing those different perspectives, even when, maybe especially when they challenge our own assumptions.
100%. You can even designate a devil's advocate in meetings to challenge ideas and push for better solutions. It's about getting those diverse viewpoints on the table.
That makes a lot of sense. Another strategy under organizational warfare that caught my eye was make your war a crusade.
Ah, yes.
Now, obviously, we're not talking about literally going on a crusade here, but I'm guessing it's about channeling that same kind of energy and focus.
You got it. Think about what a crusade represents: a shared purpose, a cause greater than oneself. Green's point is that aligning teams around a common mission, a shared goal, it's incredibly powerful.
It's like instead of just going through the motions, you're part of something bigger, something you actually believe in.
Precisely. And when that happens, people are more motivated, they're more resilient, they're more forgiving of each other when they're united by that common purpose.
Oh, absolutely. Think about some companies that are known for having a really strong, mission-driven culture. Their employees are often incredibly dedicated and passionate about their work.
It's because they feel that sense of belonging, that sense of purpose.
It makes a world of difference. Okay, so we've talked about mastering ourselves with self-directed warfare, navigating those tricky group dynamics with organizational warfare. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about defensive warfare.
All right, time to get strategic.
Because sometimes the smartest move is no move at all.
You're catching on quickly. Greene explores this idea that sometimes you need to know when to hold back, when to engage on your own terms.
I'm all about conserving energy, choosing my battles wisely. What defensive warfare strategies do we need in our arsenal?
Well, a classic one, and it's a classic for a reason, is choose your battles.
It's like that saying, don't sweat the small stuff. Sometimes letting go is the more strategic move.
Exactly. You free up your energy for the things that truly matter. Greene also talks about retreat when faced with a strong enemy. Now, before you picture us waving a white flag, remember, it's not about giving up.
Yeah, retreat doesn't exactly scream winner.
Right. But think of it as a strategic maneuver. In warfare, a retreat is often about regrouping, reassessing, coming back stronger.
Okay, so it's about knowing when to live to fight another day, like a strategic pause, not a surrender.
Exactly. Stepping back can give you the perspective you need to see things more clearly, come up with a new plan, and ultimately achieve a better outcome.
It reminds me of that saying, sometimes you have to take a step back to move forward.
Precisely. It takes wisdom to recognize when that's necessary. Now, we've talked about mastering ourselves and navigating groups, but sometimes we can't just sit back. Sometimes we need to be proactive.
Time for some offensive warfare, then. This is where things get interesting, right?
It definitely requires a shift in mindset. This is about seizing opportunities, shaping the situation to your advantage.
All right, so how do we go on the offensive strategically without turning into a battering ram?
A fundamental principle here is know your enemy, which might seem obvious.
Sun Tzu, right? Know yourself, know your enemy.
Exactly. But you'd be surprised how often people rush into situations without truly understanding the other side's motivations, their strengths and weaknesses.
So how do we know our enemy in everyday life? It's not like we can send in spies to scope out our coworkers or anything.
You don't need a secret agent, just some observation and empathy. Pay attention to how someone communicates, what they value. Try to see the situation from their perspective.
So less about gathering intel and more about active listening and empathy.
Precisely. The better you understand where someone's coming from, the better equipped you are to anticipate their moves and respond effectively.
Makes sense. So we're strategically gathering information, but then what? How do we make our move? Are there any specific offensive warfare strategies that really stand out?
One that I find fascinating and perhaps a bit controversial is control the dynamic, forcing strategies.
Oh, that one sounds like it could be misconstrued. We're not talking about manipulation here, are we?
Not at all. It's about understanding that in any interaction, there's an unspoken flow of energy, a dynamic. By understanding how to influence that dynamic, you can subtly guide things in a direction that benefits everyone involved.
Okay, I need an example. Because right now I'm picturing some kind of Jedi mind trick.
Think of it less like mind control and more like setting the stage for a win-win. Let's say you're going into a job interview and you know they're looking for someone confident and proactive.
Okay, I'm following.
Instead of passively answering questions, you come in with questions of your own. You subtly steer the conversation towards your strengths, projecting an air of quiet confidence.
So it's less about changing who you are and more about presenting yourself in a way that aligns with what you know they're looking for.
Exactly. You're controlling the dynamic to highlight your strengths and subtly influence their perception. It's about understanding the rules of the game and playing them effectively.
I like it. It's about being aware of those unspoken dynamics that exist in every interaction and using that knowledge to your advantage. But we also have to acknowledge the times when the rules get bent. Which brings us to Greene's final category, which Greene calls unconventional dirty warfare. I'm a little scared, but also kind of curious.
Yeah, this is where Green gets into those like sneakier tactics that show up in conflict, even when we don't realize it. It's
Hmm.
about understanding the more subtle ways that influence plays out in our interactions.
Okay, so give us an example. What's one of these unconventional warfare strategies?
One that comes to mind is control others' perception, misperception strategies.
Ooh, misperception strategies.
Yeah.
That sounds powerful.
Huh.
And maybe a tad manipulative. Are we talking about, like, trying to pull the wool over people's eyes?
It can be, which is why it requires a really delicate touch. But the key idea here is that people act based on their perception of reality, not always on reality itself.
So it's all about smoke and mirrors.
Not quite smoke and mirrors, but more like strategic framing. Like, imagine you're launching a new project at work and you know there's going to be some resistance.
Oh, tell me about it. Been there.
So instead of hitting them with all the data up front, which might make them dig in their heels even more, you could, like, plant seeds of curiosity.
Planting seeds. Okay. I'm intrigued. How does that work?
You casually mention the project, you emphasize its potential benefits, but you don't go into overwhelming detail right away. Maybe you share a quick story about an early adopter who's already seeing success.
So you're shaping their perception of the project before they even have a chance to form a negative opinion.
Exactly. You're creating a more receptive environment for your ideas, not by hiding anything, but by framing things in a way that helps people see the potential.
It's like setting the stage for success.
Exactly.
I can see how that would be useful, not just in the boardroom, but in any situation where you need to get buy-in for an idea. What other, unconventional warfare tactics does Green explore?
Another one that often raises eyebrows is a pure moral, the righteous strategy.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that one might be a little misinterpreted. We're not talking about being fake, are we?
No, not at all. It's not about being hypocritical. It's about recognizing that having the moral high ground, well, it's a powerful position in any kind of conflict.
That's true.
Yeah.
But how do we make sure we're not just putting on a show of morality?
It goes back to genuine integrity, aligning your actions with your values, being transparent about your motivations, and focusing on solutions that benefit everyone involved. It's not about appearing moral while you're secretly, plotting your next move. It's about approaching everything with authenticity.
So it's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And when you operate from that place of integrity, people notice. It builds trust, it builds respect, and that can make a world of difference in how your ideas are received.
This has been fascinating. We talked about conquering our own minds, navigating those sometimes treacherous group dynamics, knowing when to choose our battles, when to hold back, when to take action, and even how to use a little unconventional warfare to our advantage. Ethically, of course.
And these are just a few of the 33 strategies that Green lays out in his book. There's so much more to explore.
It's a book you can return to again and again and always find some new insight. If conflict really is inevitable, like Green says, shouldn't we be as prepared as possible?
Right. It's like having a whole toolkit full of strategies, ready for whatever life throws our way.
Exactly. That's a great takeaway. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.